When we talk about the twin flame journey, a lot of attention is placed on the feminine energy, the nurturing, intuitive, emotionally open side. But just as important, and often the most mysterious, is the divine masculine energy. Many people who walk this path find themselves wondering, what does it actually take for the divine masculine to come into alignment? What has to shift inside them for them to stop running, stop hiding, and finally step into the fullness of this connection? To answer that, we need to look at the masculine energy from the inside out. The masculine energy often carries certain wounds, certain conditioning from society, and certain fears that keep it from feeling safe in love. These things don't change overnight. They shift through stages, through realizations, and through deep inner work that life itself forces them to face. In this video, we're going to unpack the main shifts that move the divine masculine into alignment. Each one is like a stepping stone. When the masculine reaches these points, something unlocks within them, and they begin to see the connection and themselves differently. One of the biggest blockages the divine masculine carries is the fear of vulnerability. Many men, and masculine energies in general, have been raised to believe that showing emotions is weakness. They're taught to stay in control, to keep their guard up, to solve problems with action rather than openness. Because of that, when they encounter the intensity of a twin flame bond, their instinct is to pull back. The connection asks for emotional depth, honesty, and exposure of the raw self. That's terrifying when all they've ever known is to put on armor. The shift happens when the masculine starts to realize that vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength. This usually comes after they've tried to hold everything inside and ended up feeling empty, disconnected, or even broken. They may notice that relationships built on shallow ground don't satisfy them anymore. They may notice that numbing out emotions doesn't stop the ache. At some point, they see that the only way forward is to open up, even if it feels risky. This is not about suddenly becoming emotional overnight. It's about small steps, allowing themselves to admit when they're hurt, letting someone in on their struggles, learning that expressing feelings doesn't make them less of a man, less of a protector, or less of a leader. It actually makes them more whole. Once the masculine finds the courage to be emotionally honest, alignment begins. Because alignment isn't about perfection, it's about truth. And truth requires openness. When they lean into vulnerability instead of running from it, they start stepping into their authentic self. Another big turning point comes when the masculine stops chasing worth from the outside world and starts grounding it inside themselves. Masculine energy often feels pressure to prove its value through status, money, achievements, or control. Society reinforces this, telling men their worth is in what they produce or how strong they appear. But the twin flame journey doesn't play by those rules. The connection strips away false layers. It asks, who are you when all the titles, roles, and masks fall away? For the masculine, that's a scary question, because many have built their identity on external approval. The shift happens when they realize that no amount of outer success can fill the inner void. They might achieve career goals, buy material things, or win recognition, but still feel restless. At some point, they start asking, why do I still feel empty when I have what I thought I wanted? That questioning cracks open the door to inner worth. Alignment comes when they discover that their value doesn't need to be earned or proven. It's already there. They are worthy because they exist, because their soul carries the spark of the divine. This realization often comes gradually, through heartbreak, through disappointment, or through finally getting the things they thought would fix them and realizing they don't. When the masculine stops chasing external approval and begins to validate themselves from within, they align with their true essence. They no longer need to run from the connection out of fear of not being enough. They see they were enough all along. Avoidance is a common theme in the masculine journey. Avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding emotions, avoiding the connection itself. Running becomes a way of coping because facing the truth feels too heavy. But avoidance always has a cost. The longer they run, the more weight builds up, whether it's regret, guilt, or the messiness of unresolved issues. Life has a way of cornering them until they can't avoid things anymore. Maybe responsibilities pile up. Maybe they hurt someone by not facing reality. Maybe they hurt themselves by constantly escaping. The shift happens when the masculine finally sees that avoidance creates more pain than facing the truth. Taking responsibility starts to feel lighter than carrying the burden of denial. They begin to realize that true strength isn't in running, it's in standing tall, even when it's uncomfortable. Responsibility in this sense doesn't just mean showing up for others, it means showing up for themselves, owning their choices, admitting mistakes, acknowledging when they've hurt someone instead of blaming or deflecting. This shift transforms them because it turns them from passive reactors into conscious creators of their lives. When they step into responsibility, alignment begins. They can now meet the connection with maturity rather than avoidance. They understand that love asks for accountability, not perfection, but presence. And this is when the masculine energy truly begins to feel stable and trustworthy. The masculine often has a deep need for control. Control gives them a sense of safety in a world that feels unpredictable. They may try to control situations, relationships, or even their own emotions. But the twin flame connection is not something they can control. It's too powerful, too soul deep. At first, this can be frustrating. They may try to push the connection away, convince themselves it's not real, or try to fit it into a box that makes sense. But the more they resist, the stronger the pull becomes. The connection humbles them. It shows them that some things are bigger than the human ego. The shift happens when they realize that surrender isn't about weakness. It's about trust. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means letting go of the illusion that they can force everything. It means opening to the flow of life, allowing love to guide them instead of fear. This is one of the hardest shifts for the masculine because it challenges their entire sense of control. But it's also one of the most freeing. Once they surrender, the fight ends. They can finally rest, knowing they don't have to figure everything out with their mind alone. They can trust their heart and the higher path guiding them. Alignment happens here because surrender brings peace. It dissolves resistance, softens fear, and allows them to fully embrace the connection without the weight of constant struggle. The masculine often carries unspoken wounds, childhood scars, past relationship pain, or feelings of unworthiness they never voiced. These wounds shape their behavior in ways they don't always see. They might shut down emotionally, lash out, or withdraw when triggered. At first, they may try to bury these wounds. They may distract themselves with work, relationships, or substances. But the twin flame bond doesn't allow those wounds to stay hidden. It mirrors them, bringing them up to the surface. This can be overwhelming, but it's also the path to healing. The shift happens when the masculine finally chooses to face those wounds instead of hiding from them. This could mean seeking help, reflecting deeply, or simply admitting to themselves that they're hurting. Healing doesn't come all at once. It's layer by layer, step by step. But with each piece of healing, they feel lighter and more aligned. Healing transforms the masculine from someone reacting out of pain to someone responding with awareness. They stop projecting old wounds onto the connection. They stop running because they no longer need to escape from their own hurt. They become whole within themselves, which allows them to meet their twin flame in a balanced way. This shift is crucial because alignment isn't about being flawless. It's about being aware and willing to grow. Once the masculine chooses healing over hiding, everything changes. One of the most profound shifts for the divine masculine is breaking free from the idea of separation. This mindset of separation is something many carry from early on in life. It's taught in schools, reinforced in competition, and even encouraged in families and cultures that value strength over vulnerability. Life becomes framed as a battle of opposites. You versus the world, win or lose, succeed or fail. For the masculine, this outlook can feel natural at first because it creates a sense of structure. But over time, it also becomes limiting. It builds walls around the heart. When the masculine enters a twin flame connection, those walls are tested. The bond reflects back a truth they might not have considered before. They were never separate to begin with. The feeling of being connected at such a soul-deep level shakes their old beliefs. It makes them question whether the competition, the divisions, and the constant need to measure themselves against others were ever real. That questioning is the doorway to unity consciousness. But the journey there isn't instant. At first, the masculine may resist. They may hold tightly to the idea that they must stay in control, that they must prove themselves, that they must keep love and life in neat, separate boxes. Yet the connection doesn't let them rest in that illusion for long. The pull toward their twin flame continues, no matter how far they run. And with time, they begin to realize that running only reinforces the feeling of separation they already struggle with inside. The real shift happens when they turn inward. Instead of looking at their twin flame as someone out there who completes them, they start to recognize the reflection inside themselves. They begin to see that what they crave from the connection is not something external to be captured. It's something within their own soul waiting to be awakened. This is where unity consciousness starts to bloom. In unity consciousness, love stops being about possession or dominance. It stops being about who gives more or who needs less. It becomes about partnership, balance, and recognizing that both energies are two sides of the same coin. The masculine sees that surrendering into love doesn't mean losing themselves. It means finding a greater version of themselves they couldn't see before. This shift also has ripple effects in how they live their everyday lives. They stop seeing other people as threats or competitors. They stop approaching the world with the constant tension of me versus them. Instead, they move through life with a deeper sense of connection to nature, to community, to the people around them. They become more compassionate because they recognize themselves in others. They become more open because they no longer fear that being connected means losing their individuality. This is what makes unity consciousness such a powerful point of alignment. It's not only about the twin flame connection. It's about how the masculine energy starts living from a place of wholeness rather than fragmentation. The running stops, not just because they accept the connection, but because they no longer see themselves as separate from it. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. Once they embody unity consciousness, love stops being something they chase. It becomes something they live. It's not about union being in the future. It's about union being the present moment, alive in them, no matter the circumstances. That is when the divine masculine truly stands in alignment, rooted, awakened, and unafraid of love. So what really shifts the divine masculine into alignment? It isn't one magical event or one sudden realization. It's a collection of deep interchanges, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place one by one. Each shift builds on the last, facing fears of vulnerability, letting go of the need for external validation, learning responsibility instead of avoidance, releasing control and finding peace and surrender, healing old wounds rather than carrying them forward. And finally, stepping into the understanding that separation was never real, that unity was always the truth. What's important to remember is that these shifts don't unfold on a straight path. Alignment is not a straight climb to the top of a mountain. It's more like waves. Sometimes the masculine will make great progress, only to fall back into old patterns. Sometimes they will appear closed off, only for you to realize later that they were quietly processing the very lessons that would bring them closer to alignment. This is why patience and trust are so important. From the outside, it can look like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, every challenge, every silence, every pause is moving them closer to the person they are meant to become. Growth often happens in the unseen moments, in the quiet spaces where they're wrestling with themselves. And when they do arrive in alignment, the difference is undeniable. They move with clarity instead of confusion. They show up with consistency instead of avoidance. They open their hearts with courage instead of fear. The connection becomes steady, not because all problems vanish, but because they've learned how to face life and love from a place of wholeness. The truth is, the divine masculine is not running from love forever. They are running from themselves until they're ready to meet themselves fully. Once that readiness comes, the connection doesn't just grow, it transforms. It becomes stronger, more grounded, and more expansive than either side could have imagined.